Okay, so the next ornament is just an ornament that is strictly threads. You can do it in multiple tones, you can do it all one color, however you want to do it, but we're going to use built-in shapes to create this lovely ornament. So we're going to go to our IQ Designer, and we are going to go to our Shape Creator, and we are going to go to this third little icon, and we are going to, I'm sorry, it's in the pennant, and we're going to grab this shape right here, which is photo corners, and touch OK. So when you bring it in, we've got these 4 photo corners, and that's going to create this ornament, if you can believe that. How fun is this? So the first thing that we're going to do is we only want the bottom 2 parts. So we're going to go to our select key, and again, your select key might be under the eraser, and I want to get rid of these top 2 shapes. So I'm going to put a box around the top 2 shapes, and I'm just going to cut them. Now, I could have went and erased both of those, but it's much faster to just use the cut keys and the keys that are built in here. Excuse me. So the first thing that we're going to do is I want to put a grid on my screen to make things easier to line up. So I'm going to go to my properties up here, and I'm going to go, when you have your embroidery unit attached, it automatically goes to the embroidery part of the settings. So I'm going to go into my grid, and if you touch the grid, you can see that we can put in several different kinds of a grid, but I want to put in my 1-inch grid right here and touch OK, so it puts a grid on here for me. Now, what I'm going to do is move this one up. So I'm going to select this portion, and I'm going to rotate it. So again, with the red box around it, these buttons come to life. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise twice, and I want to move this up into this corner right here. Okay, so I want to get this set right on those lines. And one of the things that I can do is zoom in, and when I zoom in, and again, you might have to use your little red box, but I can see this, and I want my lines to line up perfectly here. So if I touch my size or rotate, it allows me to move this and set it exactly on that line. So now when I zoom back out, that's in perfect position. Then I'm going to select this box. So I'm going to touch my select key and put a red box around this one. And I'm going to rotate it twice. I'm going to go to rotate, rotate it twice, and I'm going to move it up here. So again, I'm going to zoom in so that I can see and use my size or rotate to bring the arrow keys up so I can line it up. Nice and perfect. Okay, and again, when I zoom out, I can see that those are pretty close together. And I also want to just look at the bottom point. So let me go to the bottom to show you, because we don't want to have an opening. So when I look down here, I want to make sure that this is going to be a closed portion. And I'm going to zoom back out. Okay, now what I want to do is I need the top half of my ornament. So now I'm going to copy this whole thing. So I'm going to go to my select box, and I'm going to select this part. And now I can touch my copy key. So here's copy. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees twice. And now I want to place this directly so that I have a top and a bottom half. So one thing I can do is put it back in the center and then use these arrow keys to move it up until they're touching. So I'm going to zoom in again. And I want to move, again, size or rotate gives me the arrow keys. And I want to lay it on that line and zoom back out. So now I have an ornament. It's a pretty full ornament. Everything seems to line up really well. And so now what I want to do is I want to erase my inner lines. So I'm going to take the grid off just so you can see it. So I'm going to go back to my settings. I'm going to go to my grid, and I'm just going to do the plain grid. So what I want to get rid of is this cross that's in here. So I'm going to go to my eraser, and what I want to do is get rid of all of this. Okay, so when I get rid of this, again, I'm going to zoom in. And I want to get rid of all of these points here. So I'm going to kind of go up, and I'm going to make it really small to get this portion out. And I can make it even smaller. And again, I mean, don't make yourself crazy, but as much as you can get out, you're going to get out. Okay. And we don't want to leave a hole in here, because if you have a hole, so right there, there's a hole, I'm going to hit undo. If you have a hole, you're not going to be able to fill it. So keep, zooming in, and don't make yourself crazy, but get out as much of the line as you can. So I'm going to come over here, and on this side, I got to get this line out. Again, I went too far because I have a break. Oops, and that's why you do a little bit at a time. So I'm going to get rid of some, let go, get rid of some, let go, because that way if I have to hit undo, I'm not bringing back everything that I've already done. And one more little piece if I can get it. And if I can, I'm not going to worry about it. Oops. See, I say I'm not going to worry about it, but I do. I keep going in and trying to clean it up perfectly. Okay, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to come down here. So I've got 4 lines that I have to get rid of. So there's another portion. Okay. And again, when you zoom out to 100%, you don't see those lines, so don't make yourself crazy. That's what I mean by erasing in small portions. Lift and erase, lift and erase. So that if you do clip it, you don't have so much to redo. Okay, so that looks, oops, still have some to take out. Okay. So now that I have this erased, let me zoom in to get that one little point right there. Okay. We want to kind of give this ornament some dimension. So what we want to do is kind of cut it in half. So we are going to go to our shapes, and we're going to go to our little spiral, and we're going to grab this line and touch OK. And when it comes in, if I zoom in, you can see that it doesn't quite go to the edge. So let me get over here and show you. It's not quite to the edge. So what I'm going to do is size that, because I want it to break this line, because I want to do one fill up here and a different fill here. And if I don't have 2 separate entities, then it's going to take the whole fill and fill the entire thing. So I'm going to go to my size, and I'm going to stretch this out, and I'm stretching it until, I'm going to touch off of here, I want those lines to cross. So let me zoom in more. Zoom in. And that touches really well there. I'm good with that, and I want to check the other side. If my line extends beyond here, I want to erase it, but that side looks good. Let's check the other side. I'm going over here, and this one has a little bit of an extension here, so I'm just going to grab my square eraser. I'm going to come over here and get rid of part of that. And when I was scrolling, I saw that I had a couple of black lines in here, right here. That's going to be a satin stitch if I don't take it out. And I'm going to zoom over farther because I saw another one. This will be a little satin stitch if I don't take it out. So I'm going to take those out of here. Okay, and now I'm going to zoom back out. So now I have my ornament. It's very well cleaned up. It looks really nice, so I'm going to save it into memory. And again, you can save in your machine memory or a stick. I'm saving mine on the stick. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to go ahead and fill this. So I'm going to go to my fill properties. And I love this. Again, the people at Baby Lock, I've got to give them all the credit in the world for this. We're going to go to select, and we are going to select fill 23 if you have it. Some of the machines don't have as many fills, but 23 is a pretty cool fill. And I'm going to let you see if you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and take my fill, use my paint can, and I'm going to fill the top. And I'm going to pick another color and fill the bottom because I want two different colors in my ornament. So let me just pick any other color, and I'm going to fill the bottom. Okay, so we're going to assign the fill property first. And what I'm going to do is, I don't want it to sew this line here because I want that to happen a little later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it not to sew the outline. So I'm going to go to my no sew, touch my paint can and the line properties, and tell it not to sew this line. So it's not going to sew any of these lines that we put in. But my fill properties, I've already got them filled. Let's go and do some fun digitizing here. So when I touch next, the red one is the top one. So I look up here to see what I'm digitizing. Here is the red one, and we are going to assign that one. We're going to leave it at 100%, okay? And if you are on a Solaris, you're going to come down to your offset, and we haven't played with the offset yet, but we're going to touch the offset. And if you don't have it, it's still going to be cute. Don't worry about it. But we're going to change the offset on the top to 2.76. So I'm going to touch this till I go in the positive direction. If I touch this one, it's actually taking the number and going down or making it lower. So I'm going to press and hold until I get to 2.76. And what it does is it takes that fill and it offsets it by 2.76 millimeters. And you're going to, it's really cute what happens. Wait for it. So I can move this design left or right or up or down. And I'm going to wait till I get 2.76. And if you're on a Solaris, press and hold, because otherwise when those blue dots are circling, oops, went too far. And I'm going to touch OK and watch what happens. If you look right here, you can kind of see Santa's mustache and Santa's nose, which I think is really clever that they did that. And we're going to leave the heavy fill here, okay? So then I'm going to use my select key, and now we're going to do the blue, or the lower portion. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to make that 50% or half its size, and then you can kind of see Santa's face even more. So I'm going to do 50% and touch OK. And now I'm going to go to my offset down here, and I'm going to offset it to a negative 1.28. Okay, and when I touch OK here, you're going to have a tiny little Santa's face that you'll see. So when you stitch it out, it's, let me show you the stitch out part. You can kind of see a mustache here and Santa's nose, and then it's little tiny here. So kind of cute. When we were stitching this out of Baby Lock, we looked and we all said, oh, we see Santa's face. So just kind of fun. And here, I actually wanted the first number to be negative 1.28, and that's why you don't see it. So let's take this to negative 1.28 and the bottom number to 0. And you'll see Santa's face here. Again, if you're on a machine that doesn't have this many fills, you can choose whichever fill you want to use. There are a lot of fills, even if you're on the 15 fills or 10 fills, you still have a lot that you can choose from. So let me get this back to 0, and then you'll be able to see Santa's face. I wonder why it didn't show, but it helps if you change the right numbers. So let's get this back to 0. And unfortunately, there's not a reset, so I have to scroll back through to get there. Okay, so now when I touch OK, you should see a little Santa's face pop up here. And there it is. It's teeny tiny, but there's his little nose and when you stitch it out, you'll be able to see. And then I'm going to turn this to a lighter fill so it doesn't take so long to stitch out. And I'm going to take this to embroidery. So I'm going to touch Set, OK. And so now I have this portion of my ornament. The next thing I want to do is add my outline stitch. So I'm going to go to Add, and I'm going to go back to IQ Designer, and I'm going to pull that shape from memory, that ornament that we just created. So I'm going to pull this ornament and touch OK. Okay. And what I want to do is I need to do a little hanger here. And at the time I'm creating that, I'm also going to create my outline stitch. So I'm going to bring my grid back onto the screen. I'm bringing in my 1-inch grid. I'm going to touch OK. And I am going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom a little bit. Okay, let's do 200. And I'm going to touch my eraser, and I'm going to touch my square, and I'm going to make my eraser 100%. And you'll see here in a minute what we're going to do. I'm going to use my eraser at 100% to create an opening at the top of this ornament so that I can create a hanger. So when I get to 100%, if I just take my eraser and when I place it here and I'm zoomed in, I'm just going to kind of center this on that line, and I am going to go straight up to get rid of my center. Okay, now I'm going to zoom back out. Okay, and what I want to do is I'm going to just create my outline here, but let's save this in memory. So I'm going to go to memory and save it. So now I've got my ornament with the top part missing, and I want to assign a chain stitch. So I'm going to go to my line properties. I'm going to touch my chain stitch, touch a color other than black, OK. I'm going to touch my paint can, and when I touch this line, the whole thing should turn purple. If it doesn't turn purple, you've got a break. Okay, so let me pick a color that you can see. So I'm going to get pink. If any part of this line remained black, and again, I can get rid of my grids so that you can see that, but if any part was black, I would have to touch all parts. So without my grid, you can now see. Okay, so it's a chain stitch. I'm going to take this to embroidery. And I'm doing this as a separate step because I want my outline to go around my fill immediately, because the more I add, the more stretch and pull there is. And that push-pull compensation, if I don't do this next, it may not line up perfectly. So I'm going to touch next. I am going to leave my size at 0.16. I could make it smaller. And this is how many repeats there's going to be. And so what the repeat is, it's going to do this little diamond shape, and it's going to go over it 5 times. We want a nice, heavy outline on here. So I'm going to leave it at 0.16. You could change it if you want to. But when I take this to embroidery, you're going to see that that chain stitch just outlines this beautifully. And now we want to add the hanger. So I'm going to go to Add. I'm going to go back to IQ Designer. I'm going to go back to my memory, and I want to pull out the ornament that has the top part shaved out of it so that I can create a hanger that fits in here. So what I'm going to do is go to my shape creator. I'm going to go to the second one, the pennant, and I'm going to grab this little one here, touch OK, and when it comes in, it's huge. But the red line is only around, and let me zoom in so you can see it. The red line is only around the topper of it. So I'm going to touch size, and if I use my proportionate down size, I want to make this 0.74 by 0.95. So you can see it getting smaller and smaller. And I'm just decreasing it proportionately. And if I go to 0.74, it automatically makes that 0.95. And I'm going to use my up arrows to bring this up and place it in that opening. And I'm going to zoom in more so you can see it. I want to get it nice and close. And what I want is I want this to set down in there so that it's not touching. I want to have an opening in here. If not, I'm going to have to erase my line. So let me zoom in farther. And you can see I have an opening there and an opening there. When I zoom out to 100%, it looks like it's touching. That's really how I want it to look. So we've already created an outline, so I don't want to do my outline, so I'm going to tell it line properties, no sew, okay. I want to touch my paint bucket and say don't sew this, so I'm not sewing any part of the outside ornament. But I do want to sew this, so I'm going to go to my fill properties, I'm going to choose gray, and I want my solid fill, touch okay. My paint bucket or beaker in the fills, and I want to fill just that area. I want this to have an outline of a bean stitch, so I'm going to go to my line properties, choose bean stitch, choose gray, touch OK, touch my beaker in my paint can area, and touch this. Okay? Now, I could go ahead and add my topper up here. I'm going to do this in two separate steps because I like my line to outline as soon as I've done my fill. If I went ahead and added my tree topper, which would be fine to do, if I did that, it's going to do the tree topper before it does this outline, and it will pull away. So I like to always do my fill and then do my outline immediately. So I'm going to touch the word, let's save it in memory. We want to save, save, save. I'm going to touch next, and I'm going to digitize two things. The first one is the fill. This is the fill. I'm going to change from the auto. Instead of having it at 45 degree, I like to use 60 degrees. Touch OK. I'm going to change my density to 110%. I like things nice and full. We're not going to touch the push-pull compensation, and we are going to leave the outline off because we've created our own we've created our own outline. So I've got that set. Now I'm going to use the select key, and it's doing the outline here, and I'm liking the 0.08. That's okay. So now I'm going to take this part to embroidery. So I'm going to touch set, okay, and that's lined up beautifully. So now I just need to add my topper. I'm going to go to add. I'm going to go back to IQ Designer. From memory, I'm going to pull that last shape that I put in there, which is the one that has the filled. Okay, so when we pull the one from memory that has the filled topper on it, now we're going to add our hanger. So I'm going to go to my shape creator. I'm going to go to my pennant. I'm going to go to my spiral. And we want to grab this one here, touch OK. While the red box is around it, we're going to size it, and our size is 0.44 by 1.18. So if we use the proportionate arrows, bringing it in, and we get to point, it automatically changes it to that size. We're going to touch OK, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. We want the bigger part to be on the top, and I'm going to use the arrows to take that straight up. And again, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. So I'm going to zoom into 400%. And I want this to just not even graze. I want like a thread width between here. So I just want to bring it down so it's almost sitting on top. Okay. And I'm going to zoom back out. So once I have this topper positioned here, this is the only thing I need to digitize. So I'm going to zoom in, and basically what I want to do is get rid of all of the other parts. So I could tell those not to sew. There's lots of ways to get around this, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase the parts that I just want to make sure that I get rid of this part. So again, you can cut this, you can tell it not to sew. I'm just going to get rid of everything except for the topper. Okay, and I could actually erase all of it, all of this. So I could go to my line properties and say don't sew the rest of it. So don't sew any of this. Okay, but this I want to assign a bean stitch to. So I'm going to go to my line properties, grab a bean stitch, grab gray, touch OK. My pink hand's highlighted, and I'm going to touch this. So basically, I was just using this part of my ornament to place this. So when I touch next, the only thing that should come up is this, which it does. I'm okay with the length, and I'm going to take this all the way to embroidery, and it lines up perfectly here. So I'm okay with that. So again, I could take it to embroidery, and I could save the whole thing. I could stitch it out, and I could be ready to go. But let's say I want to add my quilting now. I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to group everything again. So I'm going to group it. I'm going to tell it to group everything, and I want to put the whole thing in the center. So I'm just going to move it in the center. Okay. Now it's all grouped. What I could do is take this back to IQ Designer, and I could create my box and add my fill. But what's the beauty of having this is going to be trimmed to a 9.5 by 9.5 inch block. I can go to my edit button, and I can go ahead and go to my fill button, which is right here, and everything is grouped. I can touch my fill button. And if you're on any other machine besides the Solaris, you have got just the stipple fill. But look, I can go right here, and 9.5 by 9.5 is a frame size. So instead of doing what I've done before, I can just go ahead and choose the 9.5 by 9.5. I can go ahead and stipple around it, or if I'm on a Solaris, I can echo quilt around it. So I'm going to choose echo quilting for a minute. Or I could choose any of these other fills. So this one I'm going to echo quilt around, so I'm just going to save this in embroidery, and I am ready to stitch this one out. So again, instead of taking it to IQ Designer, I created my quilting right here in the embroidery mode. So have fun stitching this one.